In New York State, there is an urban legend that began in Staten Island in the 1970s about a psychopath named Cropsey. Cropsey was said to have lost his mind one day when his child, or his entire family, depending on which version you're listening to, was killed in a fire at a cabin near a summer camp. According to the legend, the fire had been started by a careless camper or camp counselor. When he learned of the tragedy, Cropsey sought revenge on the campers and employees at the camp. He kidnapped and killed several of them before the police were alerted. The police never found him, and he was said to stalk the streets in the following years, carrying an axe and looking for more children to murder. A frightening story, to be sure. Little did the people telling it know that it was more than just a story. There was a real person named Andre Rand, who grew up in the Staten Island area. He worked as an orderly for 1 year at the Willowbrook State School in 1965. Willowbrook was supposed to be a school for the mentally disabled, but it turned out to be a chamber of horrors for all of the people who were sent there. It's possible that Rand had a hand in some of those horrors, but that we may never know. What we do know is that after Rand quit his job at Willowbrook in 1966, he didn't leave the grounds. He set up camp in the wooded area of the property. Several years later, the school closed down. Rand, along with many past Willowbrook residents and homeless people, moved into an underground tunnel system beneath the now defunct school. Rand lived there for many years until the property was purchased, and they were all forced to vacate. During the time he lived in the tunnels, in 1969 to be exact, Rand was convicted of attempted assault on a child. He served 16 months in prison. Then, in 1983, he stole a bus with 11 children on board from a school and drove them to an airport where he was caught and arrested. Luckily, none of the children were harmed, and Rand was given a 10-month prison sentence for the crime of kidnapping. In the first 4 years after he was released from prison the second time, he was not caught doing any harm to any children. But he would always make a point to be near them whenever he could, and he seemed extremely creepy. However, despite having no proof that he was up to no good, because of the fact that several children had gone missing in the area during the 1970s and 1980s, and because of his sickening criminal history, many people suspected that Rand had something to do with the disappearances. It wasn't just his creepiness and his horrible past that made them suspicious. It was mostly because he was often the last person to be seen with some of the missing children. He would strike up conversations with the kids, take them on walks, and offer to buy them treats. All of this caused great concern for everyone in the neighborhood. But there was nothing they could do to prove it was Rand that had taken the missing children. So he kept up his behavior, and kids kept disappearing. Finally, in 1987, just a few weeks after she had been taken from her home, one of the children's bodies was found. It was 12-year-old Jennifer Schweiger, a child with Down syndrome. She had been murdered, and her body was found in a shallow grave on the Willowbrook property. Her parents and the entire community were devastated by the tragedy. The only good news was that now they finally had a body, and they could go after Andre Rand for murder. In 1988, he was arrested and charged with Jennifer's murder. Although they suspected that he also had at least 4 other victims, Jennifer's was the only one that they were able to pin on him, because they never found the others. Later that same year, He was convicted of kidnapping and first-degree murder, and was sentenced to prison until the year 2037 due to the heinous nature of his crimes. Hopefully, he never gets a chance to harm anyone else. So, next time you hear the urban legend of Cropsey, just remember, it's not just a silly, scary story. It's based on a true story, and his victims' bodies are still out there, waiting for their families to find them and bring them home. There's an urban legend in Pennsylvania about the Green Man with glowing green skin, who was disfigured in an accident that turned his skin green and took his face. He then became a recluse, hiding in an abandoned house and walking the highway at night, looking for victims. A spooky story that has been passed down for generations. There is some truth behind this legend. Raymond Theodore Robinson was born on October 29, 1910, in Pennsylvania, and when he was just 8 years old, he had a near-deadly accident that changed his life forever. On the dreadful day of the accident, Raymond was doing what kids do and climbing up a pole on a bridge to reach a bird's nest. That particular bridge happened to have an abandoned trolley track running across it. The electrical lines for the trolley were not shut off and still carried up to 22,000 volts of deadly electricity. Somehow, while reaching for the nest, Raymond touched the trolley wire and was thrown to the ground. He had been severely electrocuted and ended up losing his eyes, his nose, and his right arm. Despite these horrific injuries, he survived. After he healed from the accident, Raymond did become a recluse, due to the treatment he received from people who were cruel to him. Eventually, he would mostly only leave the house at night. He would go on long walks along the highway near his home, using his walking stick to guide him. Even then, the cruel people would find him, seeking out the Green Man, so they could taunt him and do other cruel things for their own sick amusement. Contrary to the urban legend, he did not hide out alone in an abandoned house. He actually lived with his parents into his adulthood, keeping himself busy crafting goods, such as wallets and belts, to sell. He lived a long life, despite the abuse he endured from cruel pranksters and despite being hit by cars multiple times on his nightly walks. He eventually passed away at a retirement home when he was 74 years old. Although Raymond Robinson was a real person with thoughts and feelings and hopes and dreams, the creepy but mostly fictional version of his tragic life lives on today as the Green Man urban legend.